Hello and welcome. You're watching Global Lens. I'm Parikshit Luthra. These are the top global headlines we are tracking. US President Donald Trump praises Prime Minister Modi, says he's doing a trade deal with India, also reiterates his disputed claim of personally averting a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. President Trump says they have reached a trade deal with South Korea as he addresses the APEC summit in Seoul. Also expects a good deal with China ahead of his summit with President Xi Jinping tomorrow. Nvidia becomes the first company to hit $5 trillion in market cap. Shares rally after CEO Jensen Huang expects semiconductor orders worth $500 billion. Straight to the global market action. Nasdaq and S&P 500 hit fresh record highs in early trade amid anticipation over another rate cut by the US Federal Reserve this week. Nvidia is leading the rally on Wall Street and has become the first company to hit the $5 trillion market cap amid the AI boom. Now over to Asia. Indian benchmark indices ended in the green after a steady session. Japan's Nikkei crossed the 51,000 mark for the first time, while South Korea's Kospi also surged over 1.5%, both amid optimism over trade deals with the US. China's Shanghai Composite also gained in trade, but Hong Kong's Hang Seng ended in the red. Our top focus this evening. Big tech is betting big on artificial intelligence and thousands of jobs are on the line. Amazon has said it is slashing 14,000 jobs or 4% of its workforce as part of an effort to boost spending on artificial intelligence. The company says the move is aimed at making the organization leaner, less bureaucratic, but hiring in areas like AI and technology continues. According to multiple reports, Amazon's layoffs could eventually rise to 30,000. Earlier this month, Google reportedly laid off over 100 employees in design-related roles as part of its push to accelerate AI. Meta, the parent company of Facebook, informed employees that 600 roles will be cut from its superintelligence labs through hiring continues in other AI teams. Last month, Salesforce cut 4,000 customer support jobs as AI agents take over routine tasks. Accenture reportedly laid off 11,000 employees across its global workforce. UPS revealed that it has cut 48,000 jobs since last year as machine learning made some roles redundant. Back in India, Tata Consultancy Services laid off 6,000 employees globally this year and plans to cut another 6,000. Meanwhile, Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang believes AI will change everyone's jobs and boost productivity. He also said Nvidia is hiring more people. The company is investing $1 billion in Nokia, which the Finnish firm says will go towards developing its AI initiatives. Analysts say the layoffs may be the first sign of pressure on these companies to justify the massive AI investments. The huge AI bets have fueled market enthusiasm and sent tech valuations skyrocketing. However, they have also raised concerns that the AI boom could be turning into a bubble. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates has downplayed these fears but said some investments will be dead ends. Meanwhile, ARK Invest CEO Cathie Wood said there could be a reality check on AI valuations but rejected the idea that we are in an AI bubble. To discuss this and more, we are joined on the show with Bhaskar Chakravorti, the Dean of Global Business and Chair of Digital Planet at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Professor Chakravorti, thank you very much for joining us. What's now happened in this latest episode of layoffs related to the AI push? Are we going to see more of this and perhaps at a faster pace in the weeks and months to come?
So thank you for having me, Parikshit. I think this is a really important and timely question. And it's also a difficult question to answer, not only because we're right in the eye of the AI hurricane, as it were, but it's not the only hurricane that's hitting either the US economy or the global economy. There are a few other hurricanes that are colliding. One is the Trump hurricane and the associated trade uncertainties and all the issues relating to trade disruptions, disruptions in global supply chains and so on and so forth, and several other factors that are in play. You noted, several major layoffs being announced by a number of different companies, and it's interesting to think about, say, the two out of the many that you mentioned. One is Amazon, which is obviously the big news from yesterday, and UPS, which laid off an even larger number of people. Now, UPS's reasons for laying off such a large number, over 40,000 workers, is partly due to technology and AI, but partly due to the fact that Amazon itself is picking up a lot of its own delivery infrastructure and potentially eating into UPS's business. So there are a number of different factors in play, and there's a third hurricane that has to do with a potential recession coming. And so there is a slowdown that might be around the corner. However, AI-related layoffs are in the future. It is absolutely going to happen. I have no doubt about it, not only because there is an opportunity for companies to use the technology to substitute for human work, but also because they're facing a lot of pressure from analysts who are asking, why aren't you cutting your workforce because technology can do the same thing? So they all feed under pressure to actually show that they're doing something about it.
Right. There is also a fear that we are in a bubble territory. In fact, some analysts have said that some of these investments could go bust because the valuations are just too high and unsustainable. To what extent will you agree with this analysis?
I think if we do the arithmetic, it's very clear that we are in bubble territory. OpenAI, perhaps the kind of the single most prominent player in the large language models, the AI space, they have sealed up close to $1 trillion of deals just this year. And by 2029, we are expected to spend in total about 2.8 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in the build out of AI infrastructure and the associated energy infrastructure. That's a lot of money chasing after a technology whose value still has not been proven. Yes, a lot of us, in fact, many of us, have jumped on these products and having a lot of fun, playing with ChatGPT and its siblings. However, very few of us are actually paying for it. Consumers are paid, about $12 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, but not much when you're considering a total investment of close to $3 trillion. And enterprises have not really paid that much either. They paid, about another $13 billion in terms of revenues. A recent study by MIT showed that the companies they surveyed, 95% of them saw no value in the AI pilots that they had run. So I think the big issue is who's going to pay for all this, and that is where there's a concern about the bubble. However, we are seeing, as I mentioned, pressure on companies to show that they are taking account of how these technologies could displace, particularly white-collar jobs, jobs that can be done to some degree of competence by the machine. So there is going to be pressure for companies to actually start replacing workers with the technology.
Right. Also, how much does this have to do with the economic slowdown related to the tariff uncertainty? The whole world is gripped with the tariff uncertainty. There is geopolitical uncertainty as well. Consumer demand is questionable. Export growth has a question as well. Do you think in the midst of all of this, it's not just the push towards AI in the boardrooms where directors are telling CEOs, putting more pressure on them to cut jobs, do more on AI. It's also an economic slowdown that we're looking at, where there is just not so much demand, either domestically, but also in global markets.
Yeah, there's no question that there's an economic slowdown, even though that's not necessarily showing up in the data. But the data always is, kind of lags the reality. And for many companies, they're seeing a slowdown either here already or around the corner. So in anticipation, they are not only cutting back on hiring, but they are also laying people off. So as I mentioned, there are multiple factors, multiple hurricanes that are colliding at the same time.
Right. So today we've just seen NVIDIA's market cap and valuation surpassing $5 trillion US. Now that's a big feat. And of course, this is centered around the AI revolution in a big way. How much of this AI rally do you see as sustainable in the months to come? how much of this will see a correction?
Yeah, so this is tied to the earlier discussion around are we in a bubble? So as I mentioned, the arithmetic suggests that the amount that is being spent on the technology is not being justified by the revenues. Now, the nature of the bubble and how this might play out and what kind of impact it has on companies like NVIDIA is kind of interesting to consider. And this is in many ways unprecedented. What we are seeing is that the investment is largely being borne by deep-pocketed big tech companies that have not only large cash reserves and very healthy balance sheets, but they also have products to sell to the companies in which they are investing. So if I'm investing in an OpenAI or an Anthropic and I'm NVIDIA, I have semiconductors that are being used by these model developers. So it is a case of sort of a circular financing model. And the more I invest in the AI innovators, the more those innovators are demanding use of my chips. So NVIDIA's value keeps going up. And so this is the kind of the funny money go around that we're experiencing right now in the industry. And it's not just NVIDIA. You see Microsoft kind of in a similar situation where their cloud services are demand for that is going up because they are investing in AI innovators who then want the cloud services and data centers and so on. So NVIDIA's stock keeps going up largely because they have the highest performing chips and everybody is chasing power. And it's unclear what the purpose of the power is, but most of the players are worried that if they get off this train, they'll be left behind. So everybody wants to be on the train. And NVIDIA, for the moment, is seeing its stock go through the roof. And at some point, the train has to stop. And that's when the question is, who's going to get hurt?
I would also like to ask you about India. To what extent is AI-related job displacements going to impact the Indian economy? You've said CEOs, managing directors, chairmen of companies are under a lot of pressure to be on the AI train and not be off it. They would rather invest a lot of money, be on the AI direction. It's like a fear of losing out right now. But on an economy like India, which sectors are likely to see the greatest amount of impact on job displacements?
So I think the biggest hit to the Indian sector, the various sectors in India, are going to be no doubt in the IT sector, in the sectors, these are not necessarily big industries, but small entrepreneurs who are in graphic design, visualization, and so on. People who are in low-level coding, and of course, all the companies that are involved in back office services. These are jobs that are increasingly going to be taken over by the machine. They are already headed in that direction. So unfortunately, these are also the sectors that have seen growth in recent years in India. And we are now seeing a lot of pressure from corporate headquarters in North America and Western Europe to replace the number of people who are engaged in these kinds of services, IT services, programming, graphic design, marketing support, and back office, customer service representatives. Many of those jobs are going to go away. And there's no question that AI is going to be, right now it's not a perfect substitute, but it is a good enough substitute. And we're seeing a lot of pressure on companies to, cut back on people hired for these purposes. And all these sectors are going to take a hit in India. Now, the one sector that might see potential growth are the ones that are developing the global capability centers in different parts of India, where they are going to see a growth in staff that are trained in being complements to AI. And there is a lot of potential for people's productivity to go up as they become better and better at essentially partnering with the machine in delivering the kinds of support services that many of the companies need. So I think there's going to be a growth in GCCs, but much of the IT and back office services sectors are going to see a significant drop in their revenues and more layoffs to come.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Chakravorti, for joining us with those great views on the AI revolution, the AI bubble theory that is being floated by some, and why we could see more AI-related job displacements, not just in the United States, but around the world and in India. On to some other headlines we're tracking. Israel has claimed to have resumed enforcing the 3-week-old ceasefire after killing over 100 people across Gaza. The strikes followed accusations from Israel's military that Hamas attacked its forces in the area. President Trump defended Israel's action, saying that nothing will jeopardize the ceasefire now. Severe flooding and torrential rains have devastated central Vietnam, leaving at least 9 people dead and more than 5 missing. 6 of the fatalities occurred in Da Nang and Hoi An. Over 150 landslides have been reported. The rains submerged thousands of homes, cut off major streets and damaged more than 2,000 hectares of crops. Hurricane Melissa is heading towards Bahamas and Bermuda after leaving a trail of destruction in Jamaica and Cuba. Hundreds of thousands of people had been evacuated to shelters in Cuba. The storm weakened to Category 3 after hitting Jamaica. The country's prime minister has warned of devastating impact as officials assess the damage. China has issued rare earth import licenses to Indian companies for the first time since the export controls took effect in April this year. Sources say that continental India, Hitachi and J. Ushin have received licenses. However, conditions apply. These entities cannot export the imported magnets to the United States or use them for defense purposes. Boeing has flown into the cash-positive territory for the first time in nearly 2 years. The company credited a surge in jetliner deliveries for a 30% rise in revenue, which surpassed expectations. However, the company took a charge of $5 billion on additional delays for its 777X wide-body plane. Remember, Boeing is on track to deliver the most aircraft this year since 2018. Time for a short break, but coming up, United States President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping are set to meet tomorrow in Busan to ease trade tensions between the two countries. What announcements can we expect? We discuss this with economist Leah Fahy on the other side. Welcome back to Global Lens. All eyes are on US President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping's meeting in South Korea tomorrow. That meeting comes 5 years after their last encounter, a period that has seen many highs and lows and even a different US president. The meeting is significant for both nations as the top trade negotiators from both countries have arrived at a framework agreement, setting the stage for Trump and Xi to agree on a deal. Moreover, it is a deal that is likely to end the global economic chaos. Furthermore, New Delhi is keeping a close watch on this, since India and the United States are yet to crack a deal. Let's now take a look at what the deal may cover. Firstly, China will have to resume purchases of soybean from the United States and lower controls around rare earth magnets. In return, China seeks lower US tariffs on exports. Reports suggest that just to get a deal in place, the US may even change its stance on Taiwan and make decisions that are likely to impact Asian countries, a point that New Delhi is very much wary of. Meanwhile, Trump, who is in South Korea, said that a trade deal with South Korea has been finalized and was also optimistic about a deal with China. Listen in.
President Xi of China is coming tomorrow here, and we're going to be, I hope, making a deal. I think we're going to have a deal. I think it'll be a good deal for both. And that's really a great result. You know, that's better than fighting and going through all sorts of problems and, you know, no reason for it. I think it's going to be a great deal for both.
All right, let me now go across to China economist at Capital Economics, Leah Fahy, who is joining us from London. Leah, thank you very much for joining us. Let me begin by asking you, do you expect that after this framework has been agreed upon, we're surely going to see a deal tomorrow?
Well, it's difficult to say what's actually going to come out of the meeting tomorrow, but there have been steps in that direction for some time. So we've had representatives, as you mentioned, from both sides meet earlier in the week. All the sounds from that are really positive, and it seems like all that's left is for Trump and Xi to meet and put their seal of approval on everything. That being said, it's obviously been a really tense relationship between the two sides over the past few months. So I'm not sure that it's a done deal that things are go ahead. But I think that's our baseline assumption, at least, is that some sort of deal will be arrived at tomorrow.
Right. I would also like to ask you on the issue of rare earth controls. Do you expect China to lift these curbs altogether? And now there are two sets of curbs that we're talking about. We're looking at curbs that were announced on the 1st of April on high rare earth magnets. And then recently in October, China had announced a fresh set of export controls impacting 14 to 15 sets of rare earth minerals, rare earth processing machinery, equipment related to lithium-ion batteries. Those controls come into effect from the 8th of November. Will China put all of that aside and defer all of that?
I think that's quite unlikely, to be honest, as the ramp up in rare earth export controls is kind of a longer term thing that the Chinese government has been doing to ensure what they say is national security, but also obviously to give them some sort of leverage in trade negotiations. I think what seems most likely and what we've been hearing in the media as well is that the Chinese will agree to delay this new round of export controls. So the ones that, as you say, are supposed to come in on the 8th of November for a year. But then they're still going to come into force eventually either way.
All right, that's an important point. Now, from a global market perspective, what are some of the key headlines that you would be watching out for? What would really calm market sentiment relating to the US-China trade war?
I mean, obviously, the big thing that we've been seeing is around US tariffs, right? So if there is some sort of agreement to cut down US tariffs, I think that would definitely be a positive. What we've been hearing recently is that there's potential for the US to have the fentanyl tariffs that they put on China earlier this year. So that's taking them from 20% down to 10%. And I think the other key thing to look out for will be the US's stance on its own export controls on China. So it currently has pretty stringent export controls on high-end semiconductor exports. And it's also recently ramped up its entity list restrictions. So the Chinese companies that it has sanctions on, I think there's some potential for lifting sanctions there. And then, of course, as we've already discussed, rare earths are obviously a really important point. Global supply chains really suffered earlier this year when the Chinese cracked down on rare earth exports. So if there is some sort of loosening on that front, I think that would be a positive globally.
To what extent do you think US will freeze curbs on new chip export controls for China?
Well, to be honest, it looked like something that was quite unlikely in recent days, but it's been sounding increasingly like something the US is considering. Obviously, this would be really positive for China. If you think about what they're giving up in exchange, it's just purchasing more soybeans, which, I mean, they're purchasing soybeans from somewhere either way, and then pushing these rare earth restrictions 1 year later. If the US then in turn relaxes restrictions on chip exports to China, there's been news that Trump is considering relaxing the restrictions on the NVIDIA Blackwell chip. That's really positive for China because while they do have kind of pretty decent domestically manufactured chips, US high-end semiconductors still far outperform Chinese ones. And so being able to get their hands on top US chips will be key in China's ability to develop its own AI as well.
Right. It is being said very widely that China has greater leverage in this negotiation, mainly because of rare earth magnets. Now, going into this negotiation, how do you think US will be impacted if we don't reach a trade deal? And do you think the best case scenario is only an extension of truce rather than any deal tomorrow?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that these new export controls have been quite widely misinterpreted. So from the US's side, what they're hearing is, look, you can't get any rare earths from China, and companies in other countries can't export Chinese rare earths either, or anything with any degree of Chinese rare earths in it. Really what's gone on is that China's put restrictions on which companies can get these rare earths, and they essentially need to be approved and get a license to be able to acquire Chinese rare earths and then to be able to export them to third-party countries. So it's more kind of a Chinese monitoring of the situation rather than kind of a complete crackdown. But I think what China is doing is, as you say, demonstrating this leverage that it has in this key good. And I mean, China controls about 90% of global rare earth refining, and rare earths are key components of many important goods. Goes from kind of defense tech to regular consumer electronics to electric vehicle motors and so on. So obviously China does have a decent degree of leverage on that front. I wouldn't say that there's no chance of a de-escalation. Look, that if China delays its rare export controls by a year and the US cuts down tariffs by 10%, that's definitely a step in the right direction. But I do think it's likely that US tariffs on China are going to remain higher than its tariffs on much of the rest of the world, and that the relationship between the two sides is going to remain pretty fraught going forward, even if some sort of short-term trade deal is reached.
Right. My final question to you, what do you think will be the spillover of South Korea talks between US and China on India-China relations? Just today, Leah, we've got some news that, and this is coming from industry sources, that 3 Indian companies, for the first time since the 1st of April, have received licenses for importing high rare earth magnets into India. India and China have been trying to recalibrate their relationship to try and put it on a somewhat positive trajectory that works economically for both countries. How do you think India-China relations will be impacted by what happens between US and China tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I think India's always been in this really interesting position as a really major economy that's kind of straddling both sides of the US-China divide, and kind of trying to cozy up to each power at different times. You can see kind of the Chinese doing the same, courting kind of Indian companies more recently, as you point out. And the US has obviously put that relationship somewhat on ice recently with its tariffs on India. But again, as you mentioned earlier, kind of signs that the US-India relationship is also moving in a positive direction. So I suspect, if anything, what you're going to see over the coming months is both China and the US trying to gain favor with India as this kind of trade tensions between the two sides continue. And I think that'll be true even if some degree of a deal is reached tomorrow.
Leah, Fahy, thank you so much for joining us on the program with your view on the US-China trade talks between President Xi and President Trump that will take place. Thanks once again for being with us. On the final cut this evening, at least 64 people have been killed after more than 2,500 police officers in Brazil carried out a massive raid targeting a drug trafficking gang in Rio de Janeiro. 4 police officers were among those killed. At least 81 suspected members of the Red Command criminal gang have been arrested. The operation has been described as one of the most violent police actions in Brazil's recent history, prompting human rights organizations to call for a thorough investigation into the deaths. That's all for today on Global Lens. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.